Today, I am showing you 10 new Commander ideas and concepts for decks that will shake up your Commander games. These ideas will be from the Caverns of Ixalan set and will not only be about legendary creatures, but also about other ways to win the game or to just get a lot of value. First out of 10 is the most interesting set of cards, which is from the Cat People of Ixalan, the Malamet. Okinec Ahau helps your creatures increase their power further whenever a creature with power greater than that creature's base power is present while Okinec attacks. You get to put +1 counters on that creature equal to the difference, essentially doubling the increase in power every time because yes, +1 counters increase the power of your creatures above the base power. Then, Tetzin helps you increase your cards whenever such a power boosted creature deals combat damage to a player. These cats are all about increasing the power of your creatures, and as this can be done in so many ways, we find ourselves in a dilemma when building this deck. There are many ways in which you can increase the power and toughness of your cats. There are combat tricks, you could give them +1 counters, and the starter deck for cats even comes with an equipment commander, which would also work to increase the base power of your cats. But I feel like the most obvious home for these cats is with Arabo. The cat has been lacking serious strength and I feel like that is all about to change with the upcoming sets. This edition from Ixalan is my favorite, as I have been struggling with this deck without using Infect for a few years. Xavier Sal is an interesting commander, but not just because he has so many words or that his lore is so interesting with being a fungal infested pirate on a world that thinks it got rid of the fun guys. No, Xavier Sal is interesting for his ability to remove a counter from another permanent in very interesting colors. So whenever you remove a counter, you get to make a token that's potentially a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, you get to proliferate a bunch of counters. The most interesting addition in this theme of removing counters is the Tomb of Aclazots, or more specifically the Finality counter. See, for 4 mana and discarding your hand with Tarian's Journal, you get a new ability on a land, which is to tap it and return a creature spell from the graveyard. It becomes a vampire once you have cast it and enters with a drawback, being the Finality counter. This means that when it dies, you exile it instead. But by removing the counter with Xavier, your creature becomes immortal. There are a few ways of returning creatures with Finality counters in the set, so perhaps there will be more. Of course, you could build Xavier with tokens as well, so that makes him an interesting commander. Pair the pirate with Milennium for some flavor and you get to put more and more counters on the Milennium every turn while proliferating with Xavier Sal and only sacrificing a few Saprolings. See how Xavier was made for Saprolings? And of course there is an interesting angle with the -1 counters deck too, which is very on color already and could use a little blueness. Hapatra even makes snake tokens for you to sacrifice. Now this one is not necessarily an interesting new idea, but a very cool deck nonetheless. The gnome deck. I think Anim Pakal should lead the army. She lets you put +1 counters on her to create X gnomes for every +1 counter. Of course this number can be increased to make more gnomes. And gnomes are not just a tribe of soldiers. We have this type, that is a soldier granted, but its power is equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. Then you tap 5 soldiers, or gnomes, to make a barracks of the 1000, which is the army of the old deck. It's a land that when used will grant you another one of these gnome soldiers. And then there is this loreful beast, the Threefold Sun's Thunderhawk. This big dude comes in as a 3/3, creates an amount of gnomes equal to his power when he enters or attacks, and then for 2 mana lets you eat an artifact to put a +1 counter on the Hulk. This guy is your second commander, but this time he grows way faster and infinitely so if you build around him properly. Now this one is a conundrum. The Millennium calendar is an alternate win condition that requires you to put a Millennium counter on it. It gets counters in 2 ways. Whenever you untap a permanent during your untap step, it gets 1. So just untap 1000 lands and you're there. But then you can pay 2 mana to double the amount of counters. Of course, just like with any win condition, it will get destroyed and after so much work, you will need a backup. Luckily there is already a win condition in this deck, or multiple ones, because of course the best place for counters is in a counter or proliferate deck. So Azuri has been waiting for this calendar as a secondary Simic Ascendancy. Combine it with some ways to untap your permanents to keep doubling the counters, and you will be fast to the races. Now this is a new one. Double-faced tribal with the Golden Gear Colossus. The giant is two-faced itself, so let's explain the front part first. Tetzin, gnome champion, enters and lets you mill 3 cards. Then you may put an artifact from those cards into your hand, preferably another two-faced one. Then when another two-faced artifact enters the battlefield, you repeat this process. Then, when you have 6 other artifacts under your control or in the graveyard, you can melt Tetzin on top of them and transform the gnome for 4 mana. The Golden Gear Colossus then has Vigilance, Trample, 4 extra power and toughness, and the ability is transformed to help you win the game with all your value from Tetzin. Whenever the giant enters or attacks, you get to transform up to 1 target two-faced artifact, and then you create 2 1/1 gnomes. The most interesting part is the free transformation, of course. This deck includes just a bunch of looking at fun transformed artifacts like the core, which lets you add a bunch of mana, especially since your commander already helps you mill permanents into your graveyard. Then there's Tekutlan, which lets you discover X after casting a spell with the land, helping you keep the value train going. And this is a big one, Sanctum of the Sun lets you add mana equal to your life total, so pop off with this one. Just play it a moment before you flip your commander and you will get enough mana for the rest of your game. The deck with Poetic Ingenuity is interesting because it cares about small dinosaurs or dino tokens to make treasures and artifacts that make more of these tokens. The flavor is lovely too, with Huatli and Saheeli being in love. You need to combine their strengths. You could fill your deck with small dinosaurs and Thopters or other artifacts to build your deck, like with Goldforged Thopterix. But the angle I love more from a gameplay perspective is a dinosaur clone deck with artifact cloning. You try to clone your small dino tokens, get a bunch of treasure, and then you'd start cloning one big finishing dino with Brudiclad. I knew this guy would become broken with way too much mana available. This one is janky. Amalia says destroy all other creatures if her power is exactly 20. She starts at 2, so working on her explorability might seem like a tall task. Whenever you gain life, you explore. Luckily, gaining life is not too hard. Life gain will be the #1 way to go about it with this commander. You get to explore really fast until you get to the 20, where you can finish the game. But note that you could explore again, then when you still have 20 power, you get to board wipe again. This includes when you explore again and find a land, because then her power stays at 20. Go over 20 and you will need to lower her power, for example by removing your equipment to lower her power by removing it for a moment and then exploring again. The next deck is about the Bloodletter of aclazots, which lets you double life loss. The wording is a bit strange, so that is interesting, and black actually didn't have a lot of this yet. Mostly these abilities are in red, where for example Angra's Marauders and Avatar of Slaughter help you double the power or double strike your opponents. Then on top of that you might need another color, because this color combination is one of the worst in Commander. The next deck, with Magmatic Galleon and Contest of Claws perhaps, returns a very interesting mechanic from Kaldheim, which is to give bonuses whenever you deal excess damage. I like the non-combat version of the Galleon the most, where you get the treasure whenever you do this, helping you storm off. Ogier Oxeneel from this set will help you with this by increasing all non-combat damage to its power, but I think the ship belongs with Aegar, the Freezing Flame, which says that whenever you deal excess damage with a spell, you get to draw a card. So not a new concept, but one I would love to see gain some more traction, because the giant has a really interesting story. The last one is janky again. Locus of Enlightenment requires you to craft it for 9 mana, 2 of which will be paid by the jewel itself. The jewel wants you to play activated ability tribal, and then when you transform the 3 heads, you get to use each of the abilities crafted with the Locus once each turn and double it. So combine the Lotus with some untap abilities and you get to repeat a bunch of activated abilities, and the Lotus will keep doubling them. I think Halo Fountain is one of the most fun things I would pair this with. And those were my ideas for the Ixalan set. Another set is quickly coming, so thank you for watching. I would love to know which concepts you love to see and which ones you'd love to see more of. I will make those decks for you in another deck tech video.